Welcome to Tail Learn Code. Here there will be tales about software development, learning from each other, code to build solutions. And now your host, Chad Green.
All right, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Hope you're having a wonderful day. I already know it's a wonderful day because today we actually have Matt Groves on here. Twitch actually let us start. Last time we tried to do this, Twitch went down. So Matt, you brought Twitch down a couple weeks ago.
I know. It wouldn't be the first time. I'm always bringing Twitch down. One way or the other.
So real quick, before we jump into the interview, quick little promotions. Tonight, there will be the Louisville Tech Foundations meetup, and I will be part of a group speaking, part of a panel for hiring managers. So folks that you can, if you're looking for work in software development, it'll be myself and two other hiring managers here in Louisville, but really applies to anywhere else. Get ideas from what we think about what you need and what you don't need as far as looking for a job. So I'm really looking forward to that tonight. And we will be streaming that here on Tail Learn Code. So that'll be a lot of fun. All right, with that, like I said, now to officially introduce Matt, like I said, it was kind of funny because last time we tried this, it did not work. But now I think we've got all those kinks worked out. Or it wasn't our fault. Although I was having other issues that day, so that was a fun day. But so that, welcome Matt, and quickly introduce yourself.
Hey Chad, great to be on the show here. I'm Matt Groves, or Matthew Groves, whichever one you want to use is fine by me. I am a developer advocate for Couchbase, if you can't tell by all this signage and stuff around here. And I am going to be a speaker at Code PaLOusa, I think that's right, yeah.
Well, that's why you're here, yeah.
That's why I'm here, yes. So I'll be speaking at Code PaLOusa. And it's an event that I've been to many times, and it's not far away from where I live, so I'm looking forward to it, even though it's virtual this year.
Yeah, so you won't have to make the drive. It's about 5 hours for you?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Although I gotta admit, I absolutely hate that drive. And more importantly, the Cincinnati to Columbus. I don't know what it is about that section. It's just boring. There's literally nothing there, to include like the rest stops have been closed, so you can't even stop at the rest stops. So,
do you remember the when we used to have, this is going way back, but the Central Ohio Day of .NET event? That used to be about halfway between Columbus and Cincinnati.
I do not remember that. I think I remember hearing about it, but I never have been to it.
That's about the only thing that's on that highway, is that kind of like a smaller convention center, hotel, and like one or two restaurants. That's like right in the middle, but nothing. Yeah, there's nothing else really on there. There's an outlet mall if you get closer to Columbus, and that's about it.
I think I know where you're talking about. Like right next to where the truck company's at, right?
Could be. I don't know.
See, can you tell I've driven to Columbus a couple times? Which actually is pretty cool. I mean, Columbus has a really good tech scene. I gotta admit, I'm a bit jealous of that scene, right? Because well, I mean, number one, I mean, like every single event that starts up there sells out. It seems like in minutes. Maybe it's not really minutes, but that's what it seems like, right? And I mean, it seems like every event you all have is just massive.
There is a pretty strong community here. And there are some really good events. You're probably thinking about Star Trek. You have that one in mind, which is an event, which is just takes place at a movie theater, which again was unfortunately canceled this year. But one of my favorite events as well. Definitely up there with Code PaLOusa. And yeah, we have a really strong community. You don't think of Columbus as like a tech hub,
right?
But it really is. It's just not for the exciting, cutting edge tech that you might think of when you think of like the Bay Area. There's lots of insurance companies and healthcare and government and colleges here in Columbus, and so it's not the exciting VC culture that you might think. But there are some really good startups here. You might have heard of Cover My Meds. They're a really high valued startup here, founded in Columbus, and there's other ones like that. But what they do isn't like super exciting. It's to make the lives of healthcare providers and patients and doctors easier, which is really important work. It's just not flashy, you know?
Right. No, exactly. So I'm curious, and I gotta say it right, the Ohio State. I mean, is it I actually know, is it a good school for CS or?
I didn't go to Ohio State for CS. I went for an MBA there. But I did know we had some interns when I worked there. I worked there full time. We had some interns that were in the CS program, and they seem to have ended up in pretty good places. So I'd say that it's a good program.
I mean, because obviously that helps a lot, right? You know, keep a community going.
Yes, yeah, and there's lots of hackathons and stuff like that. So the colleges do their best to have a pretty good computer science program at the Ohio State, and of course there's other colleges. That's the biggest one of the biggest in the country.
I had to point out because you have to say the Ohio State, right?
Right. Yes, you do. And I went to both the Ohio State University and Ohio University, so I'm on both sides of that trademark nonsense. So, but there's other great schools here. There's Capital, and there's a School of Art and Design with a lot of designers come out of there, and other smaller schools in the area and close by. So it's definitely like an area where education is kind of a major focus.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I almost find it insane how popular Ohio State is in Ohio. And I say this because, so my daughter went to Dayton, and I mean, even in Dayton, there'd be billboards with the scores for the Ohio State football games. All right, and I'm sitting like it's right outside the campus of Dayton, and no one really cared about their football team. But you better believe there was live updates to the scores when the games were going on, on the billboards.
It's a religion, and I often joke that people ask, "Are you a Buckeyes fan?" And I say, "Well, I'm required by law to be a Buckeyes fan, being here in Central Ohio." So I did go to school there. I did graduate my master's there, and I also worked there for 5.5 years. So I went through a sweater vest phase in my life, and I'm Ohio State is just kind of it's not something that you really have to seek out. It's just all around you here.
Right. Like you went through a sweater vest phase, yeah. So, how did you get your start in technology?
Oh gosh, well, most of my story is a pretty standard story you probably heard before. Like my dad brings home a computer and he teaches me a little bit of coding, gives me a book, and I really enjoyed it. So I'll kind of skip ahead to some of the more interesting parts, I guess, of that story, right? So I did go to college for computer science, like we just talked about. Ohio University, though, not Ohio State University. But while I was going there, one of the things I did was my parents owned a pizza restaurant, which I love pizza. So I worked there, and it was great. But we bought it from someone else who, when I say we, they bought it from someone else. And they didn't have really any good technology there. So they were taking orders by hand, scribbling notes, and it was impossible to read. And it as an employee there, it was very frustrating for me to get the orders wrong because someone scribbled it incorrectly. So I said, well, you know what? I can code a little bit. Why don't we buy a cheap old DOS computer? And I typed out a quick basic program. And it was something we could use to just kind of, and my idea was we use it to just print out orders so they're legible. And that evolved into like a full-fledged like point of purchase, point of sale piece of software. And so that was really my very first like commercial software. I wasn't paid for writing it, but it was used by a company to provide value. And it was really just changed things almost overnight once we had got that system completed and running, that it was just so much easier to read the orders. Accuracy went up. It was more efficient. I don't have to handwrite the word pepperoni every time, right? So that was really sort of my first foray into it. And again, not flashy, not exciting. We're taking pizza orders, right? But it was doing important stuff. And we really couldn't afford one of the big like micros or whatever you call them, point of sale systems. Back then it was a small business. So it was really helpful. And then, of course, my first job out of college was not actually programming. I was a cable guy. I graduated around 2002, I think.
Sorry, at the moment you say cable guy, I think of the Jim Carrey movie.
Of course, everybody does. Everybody does. But 2002 was when I graduated, and again, this is kind of going way back, but there was a certain event in computer programming around the year 2000 that you may recall that had been over, and so the job market was, at least my interpretation was, it was flooded by people with actual experience, and so it was very hard to get in the door for someone who just graduated. So I was a cable guy for a while. I was installing broadband, and I was kind of, software adjacent because I was just putting in cable modems, installing drivers, sometimes things like that. Every once in a while, I have to install a NIC card, all that kind of cool stuff. So, but then I eventually got my foot in the door at the Ohio State University as a developer, and my first job was, believe it or not, working with databases. Writing SQL for Microsoft Access and some SQL Server and some other things like that, but mostly doing a lot of Access reporting for a business office. And
it's no wonder you love NoSQL now.
Well, we'll get to that. But yeah, it was I eventually moved into web development there. I changed departments, went into web development, and got to ASP.NET, and eventually. I was doing some VBA at the time, got into VB.NET, eventually moved to C#, and spent a lot of time at OSU, and I felt like I kind of hit a little bit of a ceiling there, or I felt like I needed to move on to experience other things, so I went to consulting role, and my consulting job was working for another government agency in Central Ohio. And I'm not going to name it because I hated my time there. It was absolutely atrocious. I had a great team I was working with, but the stuff I was doing and the people I was working with outside our team, I just found it so grating. And it paid really well. That's the thing. I was putting in 60, 70 hours a week. It paid really well. I just had a kid at the time, so that was nice. But I knew I couldn't sustain it. So one of the things that's happened to open up, and maybe I think our mutual friend Jim Holmes was kind of involved in this. Was there's a company called I don't know if I need to name companies, but there's a company that Jim worked for at the time, and they were hiring a work from home developer position, which I was super nervous about. I was like, I don't know if I can do that. I need to be in an office. That's where I've been my whole career. But, I did the interview and I really liked it. And I wanted to get out of where I was. So I said, okay, let's do it. So I started working from home for 3 years. But at the time, like I said, I was super nervous about it. I was afraid that it wasn't going to work. I was going to fail. I'm not going to, have anybody around to ask questions to or talk to about stuff. So what I decided to do to compensate for that is get involved in local user groups. Go to local meetings and conferences and community events the best I can, networking events, and just meet people in the area that I could talk to in person, interact with, get to know, because I couldn't have that same interaction with my coworkers, and on a regular basis. We'd still meet up every once in a while, but so once I got into user groups, then I started getting into, well, maybe I can present something at this user group, give a presentation. Maybe I can help organize and help run this user group. Maybe I can help organize, volunteer at events and conferences and speak at conferences. And it just kept growing and growing and growing. And I really, really like doing that. So there's another job or so in there where I switched to other working from home positions. But I really thought at that time, I really like community. I really like, talking about technology and helping people and building stuff and showing it off. So I wanted to go into something that I saw Jeff Blankenberg do years and years ago, was be a developer evangelist from Microsoft. I said, I want to do something like that. So I started looking for what are called DA positions now, developer advocate positions. And I kept looking, didn't really find one that really fit until I came across this one at Couchbase. And I love this position. They happen to be looking for someone who leaned a little bit towards Microsoft. They didn't have much of that at the company. They still really don't. But someone who is an MVP and who knows how to code with .NET and can reach the Microsoft community. And they said, okay, you're great. let's get it going. So that's where I've been since then. Over 4 years now at Couchbase.
Cool. So I find developer, well, number one, I find a lot of people don't really understand what developer advocate is. And on top of it, I mean, developer advocate varies depending on where you're at. I mean, so what does it mean to be a DA at Couchbase?
Well, I mean, it's similar a lot to other DA positions where, it's kind of like something that is a little bit of everything, a little bit of every department, right? So certainly we do some coding, right? We're not necessarily working on the product, hacking the product, but we're coding. We're a little bit in consulting, kind of, because I mean, we're not coming in to work as a consultant with our customers, but they'll ask us questions in the forum, ask us technical questions, and we'll try to help them as best we can. We're a little bit in like the marketing and sales world because we're trying to improve awareness of Couchbase and let people know about it. And hey, this thing exists. Try it out. It's cool. And we're a little bit in other like product management department where we're trying to get feedback from developers who are Couchbase users or not Couchbase users, and what do they think is interesting? What do they like to see? What would they like to see improved or changed before they try it? And we try to bring that back to the product team and say, hey, here's some thoughts from the developer community. So all those sorts of things. We're kind of touching a little bit of each of those. Those areas, and I tend to prefer, personally, I like the listening part of my job is going out there and listening to developers and trying to gather their feedback and what problems are they trying to solve, what are the hurdles they're trying to overcome to use Couchbase or to get started with NoSQL, and that's the part I like is listening conversations and a lot of what you see from developer advocates is the going out there and talking and doing presentations and writing blog posts, and that stuff's great. I enjoy doing that too, but the listening part for me is really the most important thing that a DA team, a DA role could do.
Well, see, that makes sense because I mean, normally when I see you at conferences, I see you at the booth like all the time, and not sure if that, never was sure if that was just because y'all didn't bring enough staff or it sounds like. And sure enough, different companies bring different numbers of staff to events, or it's you just love listening to people, and it sounds like it's more you love listening to people, and obviously working that booth, gives you that opportunity.
Yeah, I agree, and not everyone feels that way about working a booth at an event. Some people feel like it's we have to do it. I have to put in a few hours at the booth, and I'd rather be doing something else. I feel like I feel like I learn more, and I just find myself enjoying spending time at the booth, listening to people. It's fun hanging out, swag and things like that. But like listening to people, answering their questions. I will say, like towards the third or fourth day of some conferences, I'm pretty much tired of hearing myself give the same answers to the same questions. And I'm pretty much ready to become Amish at that point. So if you catch me towards the end of a conference, like the last few hours, I'm pretty much ready to throw my computer in a lake and go start farming. But I mean that wears off, and I that's just because I'm doing the same thing for 3 days straight. But I really do enjoy that part of it.
So now what I know is next time that we actually can be back at a in-person conference. On that last day of the conference, I'm gonna come up with some wild ball question to ask you, right? Just give you completely on a different side.
Well, it's funny you say that because sometimes it's the last person that comes up to the booth when everyone else is packed up, and again I enjoy the booth, so I'm waiting until the last minute to pack up. But some person comes up the last minute and they have some crazy, interesting question or problem they're trying to solve. And maybe they waited to the last minute because they didn't want to have a big crowd around them, right, to talk about it. And so those can be really interesting moments. And it's tough for me because, like I said, I'm ready to just, go throw my computer in a lake and go order a pizza and sit in a hotel room, right? But that's where it's like, okay, I still want to help this one person find something cool, solve their problem, and so that's why I'm here.
That's awesome. So obviously, I mean, you're Couchbase, so obviously you're big into NoSQL. What do you find is probably like the biggest misconception people have about NoSQL?
Oh, geez. Just one?
But go for it. I mean,
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest misconception that I see consistently about Couchbase, number one question I get about Couchbase, or number one assumption, is that Couchbase is the same thing as Couchdb. And, that's just a problem that we have with naming, right? Naming things is hard in computers. There is some historical reasons why they both have the name have couch in the name, but they're not the same thing at all. It's like saying SQL Server is the same thing as MySQL. And it's not really the same thing at all. There's some overlap, but they're not the same thing. So that's probably one of the things I hear over and over is, oh, aren't you guys just CouchDB, but the enterprise version? That sort of thing. But other misconceptions about NoSQL, and again, this is kind of maybe a Couchbase specific thing, is that NoSQL means I can't write SQL queries anymore. And I know you work with Cosmos, so you know this isn't true, right? So SQL is a language. It's not, it's separate from the idea of a relational database. And so Couchbase actually has a full SQL implementation as well, which this is one of my favorite things to do is when people learn this, it kind of, you see the expression on their face, like process it like, wait a second, NoSQL, but you have SQL. So it's confusing for a moment, and then it's like, oh, that's really cool. I can write SQL. I know how to do that. I can work with NoSQL.
That's why in my presentation I usually talk about how I think NoSQL is the worst name for it. And it really should be called NoSchema, right? Because that's really what we mean by it, right? Is that you don't have at least a predefined schema, and that's really what the differentiating.
Yeah, well, I often in my presentations I'll start by saying I hate the term NoSQL, and I'll try to dig into something more specific. Even NoSchema I don't think is really accurate, because what we're saying is with NoSQL is that basically it's storing data differently than we've done it since the 1970s, right? That's basically all it means. Could be a schema, could not be a schema. Not non-relational, I guess, is probably the closest thing I could say to summing it up in a short little buzzword. But the problem with buzzwords is that they get mashed into oblivion and lose their meaning and become misleading. So you have things like NoSQL and serverless and microservices and all these things. And it's like, well, they just get sort of fed into the marketing machine and chewed up, and they kind of lose their meaning. So I did a presentation on a code mash with this exact joke in mind, like buzzwords, what they really mean, what they want you to mean, things like that. So, but yeah, so a lot of NoSQL misconceptions. Let me see, what else is there? I don't know. I guess one of the misconceptions that's still true today, even though I hopefully think this is changing, is that if I'm using, I only have one database for my entire system. So I have to pick between relational and NoSQL. So if I use NoSQL, I can't use a SQL database along with it. And I've seen systems now that are using 2 different database technologies, 3, 4, dozen different database technologies, especially with microservices type projects. And so that just doesn't make sense. But it still seems like people are asking, why should I use NoSQL instead of relational? And I think that's sort of starting with the wrong question.
But I mean, that's the way how it was originally expressed. You should use this instead of, and so I kind of understand some of the confusion in that. And
some vendors still still go with this too. So
because again, I mean, now I usually when I talk about Cosmos, I'm usually talking about graph databases.
Right.
And one of the first things to tell you is that number one is not the solution for everything. I'm not here to tell you that this is going to answer all your problems. Because as a matter of fact, sometimes it'll cause you more problems. Because trust me, I've experienced those. But then, and I talk about, nothing says we can't do a hybrid approach where we have multiple database systems.
Absolutely. Yep.
So,
but I think developers kind of naturally gravitate towards, why should I use this instead of the thing that I already know?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what's probably true of people in general. Like, why should I use this new tool when I've been getting along just fine with this other thing? So, and that's a perfectly valid point of view. It's why would I try something that I have no familiarity with versus the thing that I know I can muddle through with it, right? If you've ever read the book, I recommend this book, by the way, if you haven't, called Don't Make Me Think. It's a book about usability and design, but a lot of the principles in there kind of apply to just thinking about technology in general. Is people just muddle through. Even technology experts like us, there's still things that we, little rituals and things that we muddle through because we know that it'll work. And taking the time to explore something else, well, that's time that I don't have to solve something, a server that's on fire. Like right before we started this call, you were putting out a fire on a server.
Yeah.
So, that's just kind of the way people work. And, so I don't see myself as trying to convince people one way or the other, use Couchbase or not use Couchbase. I see myself as just presenting this as something I think is very cool. Let me show you some cool things I can do with it. And I'm not here to make a hard sell on you or anything like that. I just want you to see this cool thing that's out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the things I do like that I've seen in the industry is that the most developer, I almost said evangelists, that term has gone away, but evangelists / advocates have, while they might be talking about their product, they're generally not advertising their product. And I like that because, obviously most people would think, oh, well, he's a Couchbase guy. All I'm going to hear is how great Couchbase is. And, I don't want to attend that talk. Right. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen. I know for Code PaLOusa, we try to avoid those kind of speakers because I don't want a sales talk. But, and I know, sure enough, over the years, you've always done some really interesting talks. Talking about toasters and I'm trying to. Off the top of my head, I can't remember, but I remember there were always some really interesting ones throughout the years.
So I was actually looking back through my email history, Mr. Green, and I was looking at some really ancient Code PaLOusa emails, just trying to think back to my first Code PaLOusa, which I believe was the first Code PaLOusa that I went to, and I was looking at the schedule, and it was just crazy, all the speakers on that schedule. It was such a really good session, really good set of topics and speakers. But I think I had 2 topics because you always seem to make me work hard when I submit to Code PaLOusa. But the one thing I was talking about, and this was way before my Couchbase time, was actually a NoSQL presentation. Can you believe it? It was on something called DB40, which I don't think even exists anymore. Database for objects. It was an object-oriented database. Mm-hmm. So even back then, I was interested in NoSQL topics, even though I was using SQL Server, MySQL, Oracle every day. NoSQL, something still interested me back then. So that was pretty cool. Just to take a trip down memory lane and see that old schedule.
That's pretty good. I don't even know if I have the old schedule from the first Code PaLOusa. I have the last couple of years because we've been using the same database for the last couple of years, but I don't. I might have everything. I've got to look that back up. I do still I still have the original T-shirts because I kept several for myself, and I still we made a banner with all the pictures of all the speakers, and I still have that.
Oh, that's cool.
I was planning on getting that because this is our 10th anniversary. I was planning on getting it out this year, but I might have it out, but no one's going to notice since it'll be a virtual event. But so you talked about you wanted to get more involved, but what do you find? Why do you enjoy speaking? What really gets you? What keeps you speaking? I guess is more importantly.
Well, speaking is just a tool. I think it's I don't speak just to speak at a conference, right? It's a tool for me, maybe selfishly because it gives me a deadline where I have to make sure that I am prepared as possible for what I'm about to speak about. So sometimes, I'm sure a lot of speakers are guilty of this, but conference-driven development, mm-hmm. where something is a topic I'm interested in. I've played with it a little bit. I want to dive into it more. So let me submit some abstracts to some conferences. If they accept it, okay, now I have a deadline. I got to devour and learn as much as I can to prepare a compelling presentation. So it's selfish in that it gives me motivation and reason to really learn something and prepare that material. So I'm kind of teaching myself, mm-hmm. right? So I mean, that's one of the reasons I got into it in the first place. Was hey, I had something I really wanted to learn, so let me just do some of that at a local user group or something. But you're right. Today, as a DA, you mentioned kind of the hard line to walk as a DA, where I work for Couchbase. They want me to go and speak about Couchbase and tell people about Couchbase, but developers don't want to listen to a sales pitch, right? I'm sure my employer wants me to deliver a sales pitch to developers, but developers don't want to show up for that. So I don't want to do that either. I don't want to deliver a sales pitch. I want to show some cool technology, and some cool things you can do with it. So I think maybe there's a perception that DAs out there are just kind of a different type of sales advertising role, and so I don't feel that way. I feel like I'm there to show something cool and then try to get people to engage and give me some feedback and tell me, oh yeah, I tried solving this problem and it didn't work, but this looks like it might be a better approach, or vice versa. I tried this approach and it didn't work, and here's why. And so I'm learning, others in the room are learning, and I'm hopefully trying to bring that learning to the community and back to my employers, my company, my coworkers, to show that off there. So yeah, DAs, I don't think it's fair to say that they're in sales or advertising, like in the sense that I'm not commissioned or anything like that. But on the other side of that coin, every employee really is in sales in some sense for the company they work for. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah.
Like, for instance, I went to years ago, I went to a Dairy Queen location. I love ice cream, by the way. One of my favorite things to do is eat ice cream. And I had a really bad experience there. I was treated poorly by the clerk. My family was treated poorly. And they're a clerk. They're not there. They're not in sales. They're not the ones putting out advertisements and making commercials and things like that. But since I was treated poorly, I don't go to that location anymore.
Right.
So they lost all their sales from me because of that poor experience. So in a sense, we're all in sales, whether we like it or not, because we're out there representing our employer, whether it's Dairy Queen or with Couchbase, right? So I try to do that when I submit presentations and write blog posts and things like that. But it is definitely a challenge because, my employer is the one paying my bills and feeding my family, right? And so I need to do something to, provide value to them in return, right? So that's a really tough line to walk. And you're absolutely right, Chad. I know you know this because you know lots of DAs, and you're also on the side of conferences where you're reviewing abstracts, and you've been burned, I'm sure, and I've been burned in the past by, oh yeah, this looks like a great abstract. Let's have him come speak at our event or our conference or our user group. And he shows up and it's basically a sales guy giving a sales pitch, trying to make the hard sell, why you should buy a license, things like that. And that's not a fun experience. And so that is a really tough line for us to walk. And I think all DAs think about that on a consistent basis. Like, how can we, keep our employers happy, but also deliver something that people actually care about to a conference?
I mean, it's funny you say that. We last year's first year we did it officially, but I mean, we've always had where sponsors say, "Hey, we'll sponsor, but we need a session, right? We want to have a session." And I keep on telling them, and sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't, that your session should not be a sales call, right? It shouldn't be just a sales pitch the whole time. And you see it. You'll see the ones who do that. And they might have a good crowd at the beginning, but people leave because they're like, I'm just being sold to, right? But the ones who will talk about something different, right? Get people to stick around, who will then go to their booths and actually interact with them, So, and again, like I said, I'm not saying it's bad to, because look, that's all I really do for Microsoft, right? I mean, I'm basically just a glorified salesperson for Microsoft. I just make no money off of it, right? Hence why I'm an MVP, right? It's because I talk about Azure and I talk about Cosmos and all these great things. I mean, in a sense, I'm selling that, but I'm not selling it, right? Because like I say, I have no vested interest in it, other than it's technology I find really cool. And that's why I tell a lot of them, those sponsors of, do something that makes it sound cool instead of selling it.
Yep, I agree with that. And I think you're probably the same way, is that, not everything Microsoft makes is super interesting or even good. And so, if that comes up, you're not going to hold back. You're going to say, well, I really like Cosmos, but this other thing on Azure just drives me crazy and I hate it and don't use it.
Oh, on top of it, I mean, I'll tell you what I don't like about Cosmos too, right?
Right. Yeah.
And most of it is, hey, I've been burned by this. Here's what you want to make sure you don't do.
Right.
Yes. No. Exactly. But so I mean, along with speaking, I mean, the other thing you've been, at least I've been noticing you've been a lot is you've been on Twitch a lot. So sure enough, we'll do a shout out for you there. But
thank you. Appreciate that.
So I mean, talk about so why did you start? I mean, other than the obvious, you're a developer advocate. But I mean, why did you start doing Twitch?
I think it's really kind of the same reason I like to be at booths. It's a way to engage people, live in a live setting. So I call my channel, I call it office hours now, because I feel like I'm inviting people into the office. I'm not giving a slide-based presentation. I'm not doing anything like that. I'm just showing what I'm working on, answering questions. People who are curious, they come in and ask all kinds of strange questions sometimes, which I love. The interaction is the main thing I like about Twitch. For me, I mean, other if there wasn't for the chat and the interaction, it would just be another sort of me on the stage speaking to you, like through a webinar or something, and that's that's okay, but it's not something I do on a regular basis. So that's my favorite thing about Twitch, and some great stuff has come out of those interactions. I don't have the biggest following on Twitch. I'm not up there with C# Fritz, at least not yet, or Lana Lux or anything, but those interactions have still been super valuable to me. I've learned a lot from people in my channel. So again, selfish reasons. And I hope that people that come in, they keep coming back because it's fun and they're learning, or they liked watching me just stumble around when I'm actually coding, right? Because it's just it's the raw coding on the screen. It's not the practiced stuff with everything solved in advance, right?
Yeah, it's funny, as I was preparing to stream, I was thinking about, maybe I do prep work and all that kind of stuff. But I found it works better to not do that, just to go in at raw. Well, especially I stream every day, so it's if I don't have, I've already been asked several times, like, so is that your job now? I'm like, no, it's just still what I do on my free time, right? It's just I just have very little free time anymore. But and it's funny you bring up Lana Lux. I mean, there is a little bit different situation. I mean, so she's on there. It's not unusual for her to be on there for 8-9 hours, basically just doing her daily work. On there, which is really impressive to see someone who can do that and actually still get their work done. I know I do find sometimes I don't get work done because
that's true.
Because of interaction, which I mean, I love having the interactions, but
not everything I do I can show on a stream for one reason or another. But if I could, like, I think I would try to stream as a lot more. But there's a toll for it. Like, it's not free to be just streaming, right? It's harder to work on a stream, and also to stop and interact with people and all those sorts of things, and just be on camera and be under the lights for that amount of time. So it is work. I mean, I really admire the work that Lana's doing, because, like you said, she's on there a lot, and she's doing very cool stuff, but she's doing a lot of it, and I know how much work it is just to be here and sit in front of a camera and talk and interact with people. So that is really impressive, and that's probably why she has such a really big, large following, because she's really good at that stuff.
Typically has 90, 100, 120 people following her, watching her.
Right.
And like I admit, I mean, I've watched it, and it's a good watch, right? It's I don't, because I don't do game development, so I don't interact, but I'll watch it, and and a lot of times there'll be good background noise. Almost makes you feel like you're in an office because you're hearing someone else working.
Okay.
You know, I mean, not that I necessarily miss working in an office. I do and I don't. Right? I have two sides of that, but you know, I have noticed that, you know, I'll put that kind of stuff on, and like I say, I can continue my work.
Yeah, very cool. I didn't think about that way because I've been working at home for 10 years now, so I don't really even notice that I'm not in an office anymore.
Right.
It's just this is the way it's always been. My kids have grown up, and they've made comments to to their friends like, "Your dad leaves the house to work? How strange."
Yeah, I've only well, I mean, I've been doing this permanently for the last year and a half, and then before that, 2 years prior, it was some days I was going to the office, some days I wasn't. It just depended. Part of that because the going to the office was a 2-hour drive each way, so I didn't go every day. But cool. So well, just looking at, you know, some other things. I mean, just talking about, you know, geeking out a little bit. I mean, has there been any cool gadget you've gotten recently that you just absolutely love?
Let's see. Recent gadget. You know, my gadget life is pretty, again, not flashy. I guess if you take away nothing else, Columbus is not flashy. But I installed my first Wi-Fi thermostat
There you go. Yeah.
recently, and I mean, now I can control my temperature from my phone wherever I am, if I'm out of the house or in a different room. So I really, really like that. Another thing, this is not really recent, but it's used all the time around here. If you ever heard of this, it's called a Circle.
No, I haven't heard of that.
It's a device you can just plug it into your router via network cable, and it allows me to, for every device that's connected to my home internet, I can now control and manage the time that can be spent with that device, and what sites it can and can't go to, what time internet turns off in the day. And I have 2 kids in the house who are just crazy for, you know, video games and YouTube and everything like that. And so it allows me to just either reward them with extra time at a couple taps, or take it away. Like if they haven't got their chores done, well, internet's now paused until you get that chore done or finish your piano practice. And that is, I didn't realize how important that device would be when I first got it years ago, but I think it's essential to our household right now. And especially when everybody's, you know, when we had school and the school was all taking place here at home. So we can, you know, pause all those distractions and things and finish your schoolwork today.
Yeah.
So that's really helpful. Those are super boring, like non-flashy answers, but I have one that's kind of close. I've not got this yet. I've been looking at them. We just remodeled a room here in the basement next to my office, and I really think I want to put an arcade cabinet in there. So I've been looking at different arcade cabinet kits. Some of them are really, really expensive. Some of them are really, really junky. So I'm trying to find a good balance of a kit right in the middle to have in that room over there. So if you have any suggestions, I see you have some look like arcade 1-ups there in the background.
Yeah, I have the arcade 1-ups.
Those are a little small for me. I'm if you can't tell from the video here, but I'm 6'6".
Yeah.
So those arcade 1-ups is just not going to work for me. But I mean, those are pretty cool. If I wasn't so freakishly tall, I would probably buy a couple of those. But looking for something a little.
Oh, if you sit on a stool, it wouldn't be so bad.
What's that?
If you sit on a stool, it wouldn't be so bad.
Yeah, right. I guess I could do that. But then why wouldn't I just go to my computer and sit here and play? You know. So anyway, that's what I'm looking into next. Is that? Yeah.
And it's still, even sitting on a stool on the arcade, it's different than playing on your computer.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. That's true.
And you get the joystick feels and so forth. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, you know, because everyone can see them. You know, I've been a big fan of the arcade 1-ups. I just love them because, you know, I mean, I've got a whole stash of them. Right? Yeah. You know, I can have all the different artwork and you know, all that. You know, which you can't do that with a regular size arcade machine.
Right. Yeah. When I first saw those, I was I was very impressed. You know, I have all that in one package for that price, and I was like, wow, that's a really good bargain. But then I realized, oh yeah, I hit my head on every door I walk through, so it's just not going to work for me.
Yeah, you're usually one of the easier ones to spot in a crowd.
Yeah, right.
I don't really have to look for the Couchbase signs. I just have to look for the head. And again, me being only 5'6", right? You know, so you tower over me, right? But again, being 5'6", most people tower
Only
over me.
physically, Chad. Only physically do I tower over you.
Oh, I don't know about that. So, I mean, talking about looking at arcade games and everything. I mean,
Sure.
How do you balance your work life? How do you get that balanced?
Yeah, this was another one of my concerns when I first started work from home. Is you hear the stories about, oh, I forgot that I have to eat dinner, so I worked 16 hours today, and I've got that might be fine for those young single bachelors fresh out of college, but I've got a family, I got a wife and a boy who just turned 12 and a daughter who just turned 10. And I don't want to miss out on the stuff they're doing in their lives. The baseball practice, the piano recitals, and all the stuff they're doing. Choir and all those other sorts of fun things. So I made it a priority to I may not leave this office every time, on the exact same time every day, but once I leave this office, that's just me going home from work. And so once I'm out of here, then I'm at home. Even though it's a very short commute, that's still a commute, right? So I can't. Not every day looks like that. Sometimes I work a little later, and with it being a DA, it used to be the case that we would travel on a fairly regular basis. So sometimes I'd be gone for up to a week at a time, come home for a day or two, and then turn right back around and go to another conference. And we knew going into that would be a challenge. But something that I love about Couchbase, and it makes it very hard for other recruiters to get me to move, is that they are very understanding of that and provide a flexible, PTO type of thing, and working from home is an opportunity for me. And my team is all distributed around the world, so Europe and California, so we're all in different time zones, and we've still managed to be productive and get stuff done. And so, I think all the work from home jobs have been like that, where it's like I get more time, less time in the car on the road, and more time with my family just by virtue of working from home. And I also get the flexibility to, if I want to take work with me for some reason, I've gone on a vacation, quote vacation before with my family, where I still put in an 8-hour day, while my family's out doing whatever, and then I'll spend time with them at night. But I'm on vacation with them. I'm in a different state. I'm still working, and I can also leave work behind when I need to. And that's something that those flexible time off companies, they don't do this on purpose, but people just sort of, if they're not accruing vacation time that they have to use or lose, they might just forget or not book vacation time. And so it's important to be deliberate about that and take a vacation and take some time off. If you need to take Friday off, take Friday off. Especially, with the added stress going on right now in the world. If you need to take some time off, that's okay.
Yeah, and I mean, so we've talked about our company. Our company is 100% remote. We don't even have an office. And most people you've talked to in our company are like, oh, when I ask them how you doing, how's the pandemic affecting you, like, yeah, it's the same thing, right? I still work from home, I'm like, yeah, it's not the same thing, right? I mean, there's different stressors on you, and I mean, there's just pressure of the world that goes on you, and so me and my VP, we've been really almost forcing people to take time off, right? Because and it's hard because some of them are like, well, where am I supposed to go? I'm like, well, I don't really care, but I want you to go away from your desk, right? And I tweeted this the other day. I got one employee who I just cannot seem to get. He just loves working so much, and he was actually in the ER, and he's brought his laptop with him. Why? Right?
Unless it's for Netflix or something, leave that at home.
It was not for Netflix. I mean, funny thing. I mean, he literally was. He was worried about getting behind, and I was like, "Don't worry about it. We'll just make it work, right? It's not worth it to worry about that, right? Which is why he was out most of last week. He's back this week, and he was like still filling some of the effects. And I was like, "What? Take the morning off. I don't care, right?" It's like, but I gotta get caught up. And I'm like, we got 4 weeks until the release. We got plenty of time. Don't worry about it. And I think and the key point is people need to remember that this is not the same thing. Number one, for folks who are now working from home, this is not the same thing as normal work from home. You don't normally have to deal with the rest of your family being at home, which is definitely different.
I do feel somewhat fortunate that I've had many years of experience at this, but a lot of people are being forced into it, who for better or for worse. And that's what I've been saying, is that it's a very cloudy year. The very thin silver lining is that work from home may start to become more of a normal thing. Yeah. And companies will start to see that people can be productive, and hey, we're actually saving some money on facilities and things like that. So that's one positive thing about this.
Yeah, definitely will become more accepted. That's for sure.
Yeah. But another thing I was thinking of just yesterday, I work from home. I didn't think anything of this until you just brought it up. Is my wife and daughter wanted to go for a walk, just walk around our neighborhood a little bit. And if I was in an office, that could never have happened. I could never have gone with them, because I'd have to drive all the way home, go for a 10-minute walk, and then drive back to work. And so that's just one of those nice things that contributes to work from home balance, or work-life balance, is being able to work from home and take a 10-minute break to go spend time with my wife or my kids or whatever.
Cool. Let's talk about your Code PaLOusa presentation. And actually, it's funny. I actually just had to look up, because I forgot to write down what you're speaking about. I just looked it back up, but we were talking about how it's great when developer advocates don't just sell their product. Sure enough, you're not even talking about NoSQL. You're actually developing and deploying your first ASP.NET Core Microservice to Kubernetes.
Yes.
Right? I mean, yes. You very well might be using Couchbase under the covers, but it's definitely not a Couchbase talk. But that's exactly why I submitted this, because I've been doing some, I've been getting into. I'm far from an expert on this. I will be always upfront about that, about everything that I do. But I've been getting into the idea of, deploying microservices and how do you build a microservice, and just providing a simple getting started guide to tell people, microservice is just one of those buzzwords. Has all this baggage with it, but really, when it gets down to it, it's just this. And here's how you build one. Here's how you deploy it. And Kubernetes is often used for microservices, so that's involved here as well. But it's not really a Kubernetes type of session. It's not really diving deep into ASP.NET, but it's bringing all those things together, and the database as well, which is Couchbase, by the way. But it's bringing them all together and saying, here's how you build them. Here's how you can deploy them to a cluster. And there you go. You've just built your first microservice. It's as easy as that. Now, there's other stuff you can pile on top of that, all the other baggage of microservices, but we're just going to focus on the one thing right here and get you started and get you comfortable with saying, okay, yeah, I can start doing that. Mm-hmm. So, coming into this, how much knowledge is expected for folks to have coming into this session?
Like I said, it's not going to be about, I'm not going to teach you ASP.NET or C# or anything like that. So, it would be helpful if you knew that coming in. Mm-hmm. That being said, I'm not going to do any sort of crazy C# or ASP.NET stuff. It's going to be very, very simple, basic app. So, if that's the part that doesn't interest you, like you're not interested in learning ASP.NET, that's fine. You're still going to be able to take away the idea of what does a microservice consist of, how do I develop it locally, and then how do I develop that within keeping the eventual deployment to production in mind as well. So we're going to talk about we're just going to build a very simple ASP.NET app. So don't worry about that coming in. It's going to be helpful if you have used or have some familiarity with containers before. So Docker, at least Docker Compose would be helpful. And Kubernetes, of course, eventually, if you want to deploy to a container, orchestrator. Typically, Docker Swarm was kind of one option, but Kubernetes is kind of the main option these days. So we'll spend some time on that. And then the database part of it is, well, what if I want to deploy my database to a microservice and follow the microservice pattern of database per service, for instance? Well, how do I manage that with my, how do I deploy that alongside my microservice? And can I do that in Kubernetes, or can I, does it have to be elsewhere? That sort of thing. So we're going to walk through that whole stack. It's going to be a relatively shallow look at each individual part, but you'll have the whole pipeline all the way from typing in code to deploying to production.
Cool. No, that does sound like a really interesting session. Sure enough, Code with Sean I keep on adding it into it, saying he's excited about the session. Yeah. I wonder if, and I'm joking, I wonder if Sean is opinionated on microservices. Not sure.
I don't know either. He doesn't really speak up very much about microservices.
No, he never says anything about microservices. Obviously, I'm being facetious. But so cool. Well, I mean, with that, any closing thoughts you have?
Yeah, I think two things. If you take away nothing else from this interview, one is ask questions. One thing I say in my Twitch stream a lot is, and this is something my father taught me, is the only stupid question is the one you do not ask. So if you have a question, whatever you see at a conference or a Twitch stream or a blog post, ask the question. And don't be worried about what other people think of it. If it's something you want to know the answer to, ask the question. And more often than not, the person who you're asking is going to love that you're asking a question, be just ecstatic that you're asking, and want to jump in with some answers. And the other thing I would say is support your local user group, especially right now when we can't get together. Those were instrumental for me in my career, as I mentioned. And not only local user groups, but community conferences as well, like Code PaLOusa. You definitely want to support these efforts. Because right now we can't meet with each other very easily, and so it's tough. But I think of all the years at Code PaLOusa and all the cool things that I did there, all the great people I met, including yourself and others, and all the networking that I've built up at those events like Star Trek and Code PaLOusa and the local .NET user groups, and they're just incredibly important. So it's challenging, but find a user group and support it the best you can.
Yeah. Really to add on to that, talking to a lot of user groups, leaders, a lot of them are, I find that they're getting a little bit stressed out right now because they're not getting the attendance they used to get. We've been doing all right. We're not getting the attendance we used to get, but we're still getting decent numbers. But I know some who are lucky if they're getting 2 or 3 people at their virtual events, and I know it's hard to keep motivated, when you don't get that, So I definitely agree with you. Support them, try to show up. Because otherwise they might not be there when we can go back in person, right? Because despite what people think, running a user group there's no glamour in it, right? It's a lot more work than what you get out of it. Well, depends on how you look at it, right? I love running the groups, but in reality, there's it's not as glamorous as quote unquote it looks, right? And so I could see how I see the death of some user groups over the next year, just in the especially the longer we go in this pandemic. So yep. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate not only that you're going to speak in Code PaLOusa yet again. I don't know. Maybe you might have spoken every Code PaLOusa. I'm not sure.
I think I was trying to look at this, and I think there might have been 1 or 2 that I missed for scheduling reasons or vacation or something. But I have been to quite a few of them, and I got one more little story I have.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Code PaLOusa, if you want to hear it. Yeah. So I don't know if you remember this one, Chad, but this one involves you as well. And this was also my free Couchbase days. I was giving a presentation at the time about solid principles, and I was giving this at Code PaLOusa. You had picked this one, and this was at it was a hotel. I can't remember if it was a Hilton or a Marriott or something in downtown Louisville. It was a very large room, that I was presenting in, and it got packed. I mean, it was people sitting on the floor, people spilling out of the doorway into the hallway. It was packed, and it was uncomfortably packed. Like, not even just like all the seats are taken, but there's no room to walk in here. And people were still wanting to get in. And you came. I was just starting to give the presentation. I just kicked it off, and you walked into the room, probably because someone had told you about this, and you said, "Hey, Matt, would you mind doing this one again, a second time while you're here? Because we obviously have the demand for it." And this was simultaneously one of the greatest moments of my life as a presenter and one of the most nerve-wracking moments of my life as a presenter, because there's so much demand for this, and yet I'm kind of being put on the spot in front of this whole crowd to deliver it a second time. So I just it's a memory of Code PaLOusa that I really have to this day. One of those moments. And coincidentally, after that session was over, some really great feedback and conversations. And that was actually the first time I ever met Corey House in person, which I think was before he had blown up as this.
Yeah, he was at Code PaLOusa right before he really blew up.
Yeah, so I remember meeting him, and we hit it off, and great conversations, and he's a great guy. Mm-hmm. I just remember meeting back then at that same event, so right outside that room.
Yeah, no, so after you started going into it, I remember exactly, because it was a Marriott. I remember exactly. I actually remember which room it was, because I remember. I mean, literally, it was spilling out. And sure enough, that's obviously proves one of the heat of the moments, because really what I've done is come up to you and say, "Hey, what do you think?" Instead of
no, and you probably couldn't have, because it was that packed. Like, it was crazy. So no, that was really great, and that was something I remember I always had with Code PaLOusa. So that being said, we can't meet in person, but Code PaLOusa is that awesome of an event. So make sure you get yourself registered and signed up, so you don't miss out on the cool stuff we're going to have this year.
Right, I really do appreciate that. Awesome. Well, let's because I'm actually gonna raid someone now. I'm not gonna do any coding today. Well, I'm not coding today. Today's a non-code day. Well, let me go back. Tonight I'll probably code on personal stuff. Work stuff I'm not coding. I'm not gonna code during the stream. Okay. Because I need to take a break. I have a long meeting at 1:00.
It is lunchtime.
Yeah, so I normally stream through my lunch, and then I'll eat while I do other meetings and that type of thing. But today I've got a meeting. I want to eat before. So let's see here. Let's see who do we have that's online right now. Of course, if you have any suggestions.
Well, Lana Lux is on there at the top as always. Mm-hmm. Great channel. InstaFluff's another really good one.
I cannot get an InstaFluff. I gotta admit,
really?
He's just a little bit too out there for me. It's one of those. It is definitely an interesting thing to watch, but I'm watching like I don't know.
Yeah. So I mean, those are both good choices, but all the people on the list there, pretty small list of people who are streaming live right now on the team. But
yeah, well, I mean, I'm looking at my follow list. I've got. I usually don't go to Microsoft Developer because you never get any recognition. Right. And I gotta admit, that's part of doing it. All right, yeah, we'll go to Lana. She is always a great choice. So everyone, I appreciate you joining me today. Appreciate Matt joining me today. Tomorrow I will have Mitch Sellers. That should be another great interview. This will definitely be a different one for Mitch because he won't be able to fly to Code PaLOusa. He normally flies his own plane. He won't be able to do that this year. But all right, so everyone, I'll see you later. Thanks.
Bye.